Remember, for Russia and for Ukraine both, the peace plan could well be a turning point. What will this mean for the war in Ukraine? Let's try and deep dive. And for that, I'm joined in by Alexander Merezko, who's the MP and chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. Many thanks to you, Mr. Merezko, for joining in on World 360. Given that reports are now indicating that the US peace plan for Ukraine was drawn from Russian-authored paper submitted to the Trump administration, do you believe that this peace plan is heavily tilted in favor of Russia, and is it even rewarding Russian aggression?
Well, first of all, with regard to the initial plan, which consisted of 28 points, yes, and there is some confirmation released recently, which means that it was Russian plan from the very beginning. And if you look at the text, you can't help noticing that it contains Russian maximalist demands. Virtually, it's like a document of surrender, demanding surrender from Ukraine, and it was totally unacceptable for us. But there was a meeting in Geneva between Ukrainian and American delegation, as a result of which this initial plan was radically transformed in order to correspond more to the requirements of international law and not to violate Ukrainian red lines. So I haven't seen yet this document, the final document, but from what I know, it's more favorable with regard to interests of Ukraine. And at the same time, there are several points which were left for direct talks, direct discussion between President Zelensky and President Trump.
It's interesting you mentioned Geneva, Mr. Merezko. What were those critical points that were addressed in Geneva that have now ensured that it's a fair peace plan? Also, is NATO membership for Ukraine still a possibility that may eventually see light at the end of the tunnel?
Yes, it's one of the key questions with regard to possible NATO membership for Ukraine. Of course, we understand that the final decision depends not as much on Ukraine, but on NATO members, because such decisions are taken by consensus. There is a certain procedure. But for us, it's a matter of principle to have this opportunity to join NATO. Because, first of all, it's already in our constitution. It's enshrined in our constitution as our strategic goal to join NATO. But most importantly, this is an issue of our survival and our security. We understand that the only thing which can stop Putin from attacking Ukraine again is NATO membership for Ukraine. And besides, from international legal point of view, it's up to Ukraine to decide whether or not to join any international organization, including, of course, NATO. For example, Ukraine never dictated Russia to join or not to join this or that, for example, defense alliance. Russia is a member of one such defense alliances in Eurasia. So, and we never said that Russia should withdraw from this defense alliance, because it would go against sacrosanct principle of international law, principle of sovereign equality of states.
Mr. Merezko, is Ukraine now willing to give up territory, as has been indicated in media reports? Because remember, what's being talked about is that the territorial concessions will include some of the most fertile areas of Ukraine, that is particularly the Donbas region. You're looking at Zaporizhia, even Kherson.
Ukraine will never agree to any kind of territorial concessions, because it's impossible from legal point of view. It's against our constitution, and we cannot make changes. Most importantly, it's against the will of the people, against the will of parliament and president himself. And let's imagine impossible that Ukraine agrees to such territorial concessions. If we do that, we can this might create very dangerous precedent and undermine global security, because it would mean that the aggressor, a criminal state, can commit an act of aggression and can be rewarded, not punished for the crime of aggression. This would embolden other potential aggressors all over the world. That's why it's so dangerous. We cannot allow this to happen.
But that's already happening, given that US mediation is also ensuring that the Russian point of view is also incorporated. What's your assessment of US engagement, especially recently we've seen that there's a consistent engagement happening with U.S. Secretary of State, the U.S. Army Secretary Dan Driscoll, also reaching out to the Ukrainian president. We've seen how Steve Witkoff has been making an outreach to the Kremlin. What's your assessment with Ukraine? Does Ukraine believe that they've been pro-Kremlin?
When we're talking about our relations with our strategic partner and our friend, and the United States, no doubt, remains to be our close partner, we can see that American people continue to support Ukraine, and the Congress also. I recall the famous phrase by Winston Churchill. He once said that you can always count on Americans taking the right decision, but only after they have exhausted all alternatives. So maybe President Trump is in the process of exhausting the last alternatives before taking the right decision. And I would also know that in his entourage, there are different people. Of course, there is Mr. Witkoff, who tends to follow Russian narratives, which is dangerous for American national interests. But there are other people with more strategic thinking who understand that to continue to support Ukraine is in the best national interest of the United States. Because Russia is waging war not only against Ukraine, it's waging the war against all democratic states, against democracy. And that's why I firmly believe that we as democratic countries, including India, the biggest democracy in the world, we should be on the side of international law, UN Charter, and we should be united in our reaction against aggression, because the crime of aggression under international law is a crime against all countries in the world.
All right. May peace prevail in Ukraine at the soonest. Many thanks to you, Mr. Merezko, for joining in on World 360. Appreciate your insights.